taking a bold step to test the laws in respect of this. What's your initial impression about the happenings of the last few days in respect of this case? And of course, what you might know from your own experience as happens or pertains in mission schools.
Good morning, Salom, and thanks for having me. Yeah, the case raises very interesting issues that I think we need to look at it objectively and from a dispassionate perspective so that we will not let sentiments overrule or influence the outcome that we have. So we have on one hand the Wesley Girls School arguing that the school founded on the Methodist principles and founded by the Methodist Church has certain obligations to uphold certain principles or tenets which are in line with the Methodist faith. And therefore, the argument by Mr. Shafic that it is being practicing religious discrimination is wrong. It's not true. But looking at it from my angle, we need to first of all understand whether this is a public school or a private school. If it is a private school, the law allows for a private institution to have some leeway in determining its or influencing how the school is run on religious grounds. So in the first place, the institution, everybody has a right to set up a school. And if you set up a school, there's a limit to which you can allow for certain practices and the way that the school should be run without violating the Constitution. However, if it is a public institution, the rules differ. Because as a public institution, it is open to all citizens of the country to attend, and therefore the discrimination of any form cannot be allowed to determine who qualifies to enter the school and who qualifies to practice in what state or manner. From the discussions going on, I see that the Methodist Church is contending that the school remains a church or religious-based institution. But from my understanding of a public assisted school, so long as the government is involved in paying the fees of the teachers and subjecting the school under Ministry of Education and then the Ghana Education Service rules, then that institution becomes a public institution. And therefore, freedom of religion, which is enshrined in our Constitution, should be respected. Otherwise, it will lead to other violations of the Constitution, such as the one on freedom against discrimination, and then equality before the law. And then also even in the context of freedom of expression. So in that regard, my initial take on the matter is that it doesn't lie in the bosom of the school authorities or its board to conclude that Muslim children should not be allowed to practice their faith. I think that it cannot be a full-scale enjoyment of everybody's freedoms because there are competing interests here. When you talk about freedom of religion, it is about the freedom that somebody has to profess his or her religion. And so one cannot use a public institution to limit somebody's right to enjoy the freedom. But the competing interests should end in a way that we're able to find a common ground between the school and the students so that it will create a balance such that the students can profess their religion, at the same time recognize that a right is not absolute. In this case, the right to freedom of expression is not absolute. So it's subject to certain limitations. So when we bring in the limitations, it can determine how those rights can be enjoyed, while at the same time, the institution that is a Methodist-based institution can also enjoy certain freedoms that pertain to that particular belief or doctrine that the Methodist Church has. So that at the end of the day, there'll be peace and there'll be orderliness on the campus. Students can learn to develop their full potential, and then also to practice their faith in such a way as to even support their learning environment. So thank you. That will be my initial thoughts on the matter.
Yes. So, so the Wesley Girls Senior High School, that's a public institution because it receives public funding. But do we have a middle ground? Of course, the Ghana Education Service will have to answer this, whether we could have some arrangement for such schools, because the missions made huge investments in building those schools and continue to influence those schools. Of course, government pays the salaries of teachers, and government now builds infrastructure, and government is taking over those schools. But what advantages will these missions get then? Why did they establish the schools? They established the schools for a reason. And so now making it free for all, in quotes, defeats that purpose, doesn't it?
Well, the point we need to note is that when you are in your little corner doing your own things, you enjoy certain freedoms. And even you have the freedom to think anyhow you want to. That one is not subject to any restrictions. So it is an absolute freedom. But the moment you begin to interact with the larger society, you subject the freedom you have to certain limitations so that others can also enjoy their rights in case there is a clash between two rights. So that is where the balancing act comes in. And that is where sometimes where there's a conflict, we need to bring in the courts to be able to strike that balance, which will be fair, and it will enable each one to enjoy his or her rights to the extent that it will not compromise the ability of another person to enjoy their rights. We know that the Methodist Church was set up. There are other religious bodies also set up. But when they were set up initially, the kind of freedoms, such as freedom of religion, that they enjoyed was almost absolute in that respect. But the moment that interaction comes in, where you open up your school to government involvement, and when you open up your school to admit other students from other faiths, you compromise the almost absolute freedom that you used to enjoy. And so that is what the Methodist Church needs to recognize, and to make sure that while it is not to say that their rights should be completely curtailed, and therefore there shouldn't be any room for the practice of Methodism and so on, it should also recognize that other citizens have the right to enjoy their freedoms. And that is clearly stated in Article 12.1, for example, of our Constitution. And Article 17 also talks about non-discrimination, that we should all be treated equally, irrespective of our background, religious background, political affiliation, and so on and so forth. So it is not to actually interfere in or to deny the Methodist Church the freedom to maybe even propagate the Methodist faith to their members or to the students. But, you know, religion is such a delicate issue that if we are not careful, it can create a whole lot of tension and unnecessary trouble within the society. But the bottom line is that religion cannot be imposed. If you want people to come to your institution, there are two reasons for allowing other faiths to come in. Either you want them to be exposed to the Methodist faith in this context, but also to enable them not to give them the education that will enable them to stand on their 2 feet, become students who at the school, and will lay the foundation for them to, attain their full potential and to be able to acquire job opportunities and contribute to the development of the society. So while they come in, they are supposed to, the church will expect that they will respect the doctrines and beliefs of the church, and at the same time not practice what other faith they are bringing in. And so at the end of the day, that balancing act should make sure that there are certain practices on the campus that the non-Christian members should take part in. But also when it comes to certain specific fundamental practices of the non-Christian students, they should also be given some room. And through that, they'll be able to create that tolerance and respect for each other's freedoms in such a way that it can create that enabling environment on the campus for students to enjoy their rights and freedoms.